the blindness of these children and their experience with the outside world. Like, this is obviously horrible treatment that they're going through, but it's all they know. So it's kind of playing that as well. And it was really interesting working with young kids because, you know, you kind of all work together, and seeing everyone in wigs was really crazy as well.
I hate to say I'm excited to talk about this show because it's very serious, but at the same time, I am so moved by what I've seen so far. It's been very engaging and very eye-opening to see. Julia, I'll come to you first, and then Guy, what about the material really sparked your interests to want to be a part of the show?
Yeah, I just, for starters, I thought it was very interesting. There was obviously quite a long audition process, but it's a very interesting show. There's really not much like it out there. I guess, as you know, it's based on the book In the Clearing by J.P. Palmare, and it draws inspiration from lots of cults throughout history. But I think that just the idea of, you know, I guess, for lack of a better word, a cult of blonde children, and all of the idea of, you know, what was happening with them, what was being inflicted upon them, and just the concept of, I guess, shooting all of this in Melbourne, which is such an eerie location, out where we did shoot, it just really piqued my interest. It was very interesting. It's not a lot like it out there.
I think any of us are probably fascinated by the psychology that exists within a cult, the power dynamic that occurs between those who are leading the way and those who are following, and that vulnerability that exists and occurs. And no matter which cult we're talking about, I think there's a very precarious sort of existence that can be taken advantage of. And, you know, I'm sure on some level most cults begin with good intentions, and they can go off the rails. I mean, the unusual story here, I think, is that this is really run by a woman. Most cult leaders are men, and so this was quite fascinating. I know Matt Cameron, who wrote it. I'm a good friend of his, and Jeffrey Walker, who directed our first, who sort of set the show up. I've worked with before, and so I was aware of it. And when they started talking to me about it, I just said, "Oh, I'm in. This is really fascinating." I hadn't read the book, but there was certainly enough in what I saw on the page that intrigued me. So, you know, and obviously the character that I got to play of Dr. Bryce Latham, who's sort of has these, you know, metaphysical views of the world, was quite intriguing. So yeah, there's a lot in there, and a lot of very delicate emotional stuff, which I think any human being would be taken by and interested in, etc. So there was a lot to be inspired by.
Well, and I love the way that it tackles a lot of those emotional, heavy themes, like you say, especially through Julia, your character. I mean, she is thrust to the forefront of audiences' perspective right away. And, you know, as what is it like, you know, getting to the heart of a character who audiences aren't sure what to think of right away, and then as she evolves, you know, we begin to empathize and sympathize with her.
I think that for my character Amy, there's no real, I guess, structure, you could say, for playing someone who's, I guess, within a cult. So I guess when looking at playing her, I didn't actually read the book until, you know, after we finished shooting, because I wanted to give her a chance to be a very fresh character that kind of interacted with her surroundings. But I think that it's a very interesting role because she's obviously, as you said, at the forefront of, I guess, the cult, and, you know, she's the oldest girl and she's got a lot of responsibility on her in that way. And I think it's just very interesting to see, I guess, as Guy was saying, the psychology of cults with, I guess, the complexity that is weighing on her character, because she's got so much to think about. And there's obviously all these younger children in the cult, and I feel she's quite maternal towards them. So I guess it's how she journeys through taking care of these children, but also, you know, being obedient to the leader of the cult. So, you know, the character Miranda plays. But I think it's very interesting because when you see children in a cult, it's very shocking. It's jarring to see such young children.
Well, and that absolutely, that's one of the things that's interesting about cults. I mean, it gets back to what I was saying before, this idea of there being a leader and people being vulnerable to that leader, particularly when it's kids and a mother figure, where they need their mummy, they need their mother, But really, it's quite clear to a lot of the kids in the story that there's abuse on some level going on, but they don't know any different, and so there's a sort of a conflicted feeling, I suppose, but also a level of acceptance that this is all we have, this is all we know, so we have to stick with it, otherwise we won't survive. So it's a really, really dangerous arena, isn't it?
There's also, I guess, the blindness of these children and their experience with the outside world. Like, this is obviously horrible treatment that they're going through, but it's all they know. So it's kind of playing that as well. And it was really interesting working with young kids because, you know, you kind of all work together, and seeing everyone in wigs was really crazy as well. But
that's the interesting thing as well, is that really, for me watching it, and I've only watched the first 4, you really do get the sense that they have no clue about the outside world. Like really cut off. So that in itself is just, I mean, just that alone is quite a damaging, prospect.
It's confronting.
Yeah, I mean, my mind immediately goes to the conversation of the one new character having, TV and all this outside and nobody knowing what this is. I mean, it's quite a jarring sequence to watch and to realize. But to go back to the point you were both making about the maternal instinct coming from Miranda, I mean, I love the individual dynamics you both have with her. And Julie, I'll start with you, and then Guy. I mean, you were just talking about how there's not a lot of structure in developing a character like this at the start. But what was it like, finding your rapport and your specific dynamic with her off camera before shooting?
When it comes to Amy, I really did want to allow the character to find me. I think that there's a deep amount of complexity within the character because she's got all of these responsibilities and all of this stress, and I guess you could say abuse just daily. And I guess when working with Miranda, who is the mother figure for Amy, it ended up, it was very creepy to all these pressures on her. She's the oldest girl. She's always told that I guess she's the chosen one by the cult leader, Miranda. And I think that with all of this responsibility, having that relationship, it's very intense between both of them because, as I said, there's a lot resting on her shoulders. But Amy's a character I didn't really want to overthink. I think that when you're in the situation, and I was obviously wearing a wig, but wearing that wig and in the costume with all the children and in the environment, you really do find the character. I found myself adapting just mannerisms and just behaviors to do with her, but it's one of the most interesting characters I've ever played because I really did feel wholly like her during filming. And
you really don't know, I suppose, am I speaking on behalf of the kids, that you just don't know when you look at the character that Miranda plays, Maitreya, our leader, who's so sort of loving on one level, but so unpredictable on another. Everybody's on eggshells. Everybody really is just trying to please her the entire time. So it's a very, it's a really unnerving position to be in. I mean, funnily enough, my character was probably the only one who wasn't, in a way, he felt he completely owed everything to her and felt that he was sort of driven by her. But because she'd been a student of his at university, and he had all sorts of ideas about better ways to live, but he socially was quite inept. The way in which she came forward as a student to him at university and kind of pronounced what it is that he's trying to express, he just saw in her this vision of perfection. She will be the spokesperson for all these ideas that I have. And she then took those ideas and she clearly had her own wonderful charisma and wonderful way with people around her. So he happily just let her sort of run the show because she had far more, social ability than he ever could have. But of course, he was quite a bit older than her. So he's in a very different position to her than, say, all the kids are. And I think he had no emotional connection to those children whatsoever. I mean, we had a scene where I come to see you and you're clearly still under the effects of having taken LSD. He shows no compassion to her whatsoever. To him, they're all little lab rats.
Yeah.
We're creating a better world here, and there's going to be some collateral damage, and this is it. And that's okay.
Yeah.
So quite
I
a
guess
position that he's
it
taken as well.
was. And all these children just know, without a doubt, they know they have to do anything to please Maitreya. It's really quite haunting because they're not being treated properly. But as Guy was saying, they don't know how they should be being treated.
Any different. Yeah.
Well, it's been a haunting experience so far. I have not been able to watch this show entirely, so I do look forward to getting to see how the rest of it plays out for you both and to spread the word about it. So thank you both so much for taking the time. I do greatly appreciate it.
Thank you so
Pleasure.
much.